Hello and welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast. Back from a break, I'm your host, Will Chernoff, and this episode is sponsored by Pearson Instruments. That's Brad Pearson. He is a guitar tech and luthier based in South Vancouver. His shop is off of Oak Street, kind of in the Marpole neighborhood, and I've been there many times recently because I've been taking all my string instruments to Brad. He's been helping me get them feeling amazing, sounding beautiful, and honestly, it gets me inspired to play more. And I think that's true regardless of whether or not you're a professional performer like I've been for 10 years, or if you're a hobbyist or you have family members who just have a guitar in your house. Your string instruments deserve to sound and feel great. Brad can help you do that, so I highly recommend you go take your instruments to him, use his services, get those instruments back, and get going with more playing in your life. So to learn more about Brad, you can go to pearsoninstruments.ca, check out his services, book an appointment with him, get your instruments over there. Once again, pearsoninstruments.ca to get your string instruments sounding and feeling great. This episode is sponsored by 12th Street Sound. Anthony Senerini's got your back. He's got a special deal for you, the listener of this show, to get up to 20% off your next recording project. Now, that could be recording your music in the studio. It could be getting mixes done, or it could be going all the way from demo to final mixes with him at 12th Street Sound. I've done that. He's mixed my first album, Aim to Stay. He's recorded multiple EPs that I've released. He's recorded my second album that I'm working on putting out right now. So I know him, I trust him, and I recommend you work with him too. It's especially great for artists on a budget who want something a little bit different, but that still stands up to the best of the best. So you can get that offer, 20% off your next recording project, by going to 12thstreet.ca/RCP. And if you're doing something different that doesn't quite match the offer, let Anthony know and he'll still give you access to a special rate. 12thstreet.ca, 12thst.ca/RCP to get a deal on your next recording project this summer.
When you have a community to go and percolate in and figure out what it is you are, you're going to thrive. You know that you can go out and have a good time. Your community are going to reciprocate that back at you, and you just know that you're heard.
Vancouver music podcasters have to stick together. There's not a lot of us, but maybe there's more of us than you think. That's why I've had Justice McClellan from the J-Pod on this show, Jen Fritz from the FM podcast, and we have another guest today who has his own local music podcast. I was very excited to meet him and chat about it, as well as his own music. It's outside of the jazz world, but hey, this is the summer. We're switching things up. You're listening to the only weekly interview podcast about creative music in Canada. Our guest today is an alt-pop artist, singer-songwriter, and producer under his own name, and he is the host of Just an Aridonis podcast, available only on Spotify and as a video cast on his YouTube channel. You can find his music everywhere, though, and you can find him on social media. So please welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast, Aridonis.
Wow, your intro is so much more professional than mine. I just like, I make a point of trying to improv it every time, and yeah, that sounds so much better. You're making me second guess myself.
Well, thank you. The thing is, you can go back and listen to the episodes before I had it figured out.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I come from the jazz world, and it's a bit less of a thing there. Sure, in our world, sometimes people will say, oh, I recorded that album when I was a lot younger, and I'm in such a different place now, so it's weird to go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
Your music journey started in December 2019 with your first EP. You've released a handful of singles between now and then. Where do you draw that line right now? Where does your identity end in your catalog and you feel like, wow, that was a past life?
Oh man, I mean, it's like it feels like when I go back to the first little bit of music I put out, it feels like such a it's definitely a stark contrast, but it's almost like there's like a gradient to it from then to now. But there's like there was sort of a defining change around the time I released a single called Hey, because that was around the time I started going to therapy and really like, you know, being a little bit less self-deprecating and a little bit more open to who I was as a person. Whereas the previous stuff was a little bit more, I wanna change me, or like I'm the problem. That was like the name of the first EP, you know, and it was just like a lot of, you know, inward sort of damaging stuff. And And then there was sort of a marked shift around the time of Hey, where I started to kind of learn a little bit more about how to communicate in a healthy way. And yeah.
And you emphasize that by putting out that great live video you did, the session style video of
Yeah.
Hey with Cassandra Mays and Royal Oak.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was your experience like putting that together?
That was, so Cassandra produced it. Her and I are good friends, and we were writing a lot together, in the, summer of like 2019. And then, we started work on that song, and then pandemic happened and blah, blah, blah. But then, I had always sort of intended to have like a really banging live video for it. So, through the pandemic, I met, I kind of got locked down right after moving into the place where I'm living now. And I was living with 5 roommates I didn't know. And it was like I moved in like end of February 2020. So it was just like, oh, these are fresh, brand new people. And then I ended up, really vibing with them creatively. And one of the sort of friend groups I got brought into was a bunch of like videographers and people like that are just like, I keep trying to pay them to do the work, but they're like, no, I just really like doing this. And I'm just like, wow, that's like, I feel guilty sometimes because they're just so friggin' talented. This one camera person in particular, Jay, that I work with, at Lux328 on Instagram, I think. They're fantastic, and then my roommate Devi, they're also fantastic. They did a lot of the sort of assisting on the project, and then Royal Oak are just like some buds of mine, and they were just like, yeah, we'll help you out. Yeah, like we need a band, whatever. And they showed up knowing all the stuff like right away. It was like, it's so amazing when you just get to work with a flawless group of musicians like that, because it was like I was the weak link in the whole thing, and that's how I want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often feel lucky timing wise because I moved into our current place in February 2019. We got married in March 2019. That was a big one. We've been thinking about that because of the timing, right?
Yeah.
If we waited another year, who knows, right?
Yeah,
But one
exactly.
thing I've never done is live with other musicians. So it sounds like a stupid question, but
Yeah.
what is it like living with a bunch of other musicians?
I mean, it was kind of like I'd had a bunch of different living situations leading up to this. Like I was in a pretty like heavy relationship, like straight out of high school, and moved out from my parents' place like probably a lot earlier than I should have. And then after that, it was after that kind of fell apart, I was living with my grandmother, and I was like, you know what I've never done? Like I've never just been in a house full of dudes and just like had like that experience, because I didn't really have much of a college experience. I did like a 1-year music program at Douglas College. And then it was like, I really feel like I'd benefit from just being around a bunch of like people in the same sort of headspace as me. And I was very right about that. I really like living this way, mostly because, it's just like I get to hang out with a lot of, cool people and bounce ideas off of each other. And we're all in totally different places musically. Like my one roommate down the hall does, cause we're just in a big house. My one roommate down the hall is a house producer. My like next door roommate does like ambient music under JT. You should look that up if you like ambient, sort of just you looking for something to fall asleep or just think about the universe too.
Nice.
Downstairs, I've got Devi and Adamo. Adamo's one day is going to put out like a spaghetti western record or something that's going to just blow somebody's mind. He's just, I'm waiting for the dam to break on his creativity.
Okay.
And then, and then Dev does, all kinds of stuff, from like harsh noise stuff to like metalcore, really just all over the place, cool stuff.
Yeah. You're talking about your roommates and all the different genres. I had a hard time just coming up and calling you an alt pop artist at the top of the intro. When you were coming up, what did you fall in love with? What did you start listening to, and what's your bag?
I think that like the first thing that like really, like, I kind of bounced around a lot. I was a classic rock kid, just up until I was a teenager, and then it got kind of repetitive for me, and I wanted to kind of expand a little more. And I didn't really make it very far outside of that, because like the first artist that really grabbed me and pulled me in a direction uh, outside of my like classic rock upbringing was Jack White and the White Stripes.
Very
And
nice.
like I'm literally wearing a Jack White shirt right now. But the but it was that really kind of pulled me in this sort of new way of thinking about rock music, and as he kind of came out with, I was right there, whenever he came out with a new project, and so bands like the Black Keys and Jack White were kind of where I like, and Queens of the Stone Age, and just really like kind of riff driven modern rock, yeah, with a I pay a lot of attention to lyrics, so lyrics that it really bugs me when I can guess what the next rhyme is going to be. As soon as somebody does that, it pulls me right out of the song. Like if I hear the word like, sky, and I can say, please don't end the next line with high, or something like that.
I was thinking that word too.
Exactly. Like any of those, as soon as they hit it, it's just like, it's like I get pulled out of the Matrix and I'm just covered in goo, But that was, so artists like that kind of have just a slightly like it's got pop appeal to it, but it's got a slight twist to it where you're not quite exactly sure what's going to happen next. And then from there, I got into artists like LCD Sound System and Gorillaz and Beck and stuff like that.
So way back on one of your posts on Instagram, you described a period, it was after the fact, you described this period in your musical journey, which I think is after you put out the EP, but you can correct me if I got the timeline off, as proto Aridonis, where I didn't know how or what to do with these songs.
Yeah.
What period was that?
So that was when I started sort of producing my own music, because I was, I'd originally intended to be just a full-time producer for other people's stuff, and engineer and whatever. And I did that, I realize now looking back, as a way of like, putting like a capitalist sort of mindset of like, this is how I will make a career, when what I really wanted to do was just make my own songs and play them for people and, go just be creative and do shows and stuff. But I made it in my head that I was like, if I just get a job at a recording studio, then I'll have a job, and then it doesn't feel like I'm, being like a lazy artist person, you know what I mean?
And a job in the field too,
exactly,
right? Like that's what you're talking about, the legitimacy of the job in the field.
Exactly,
right?
That was exactly it. I was trying to give my need to want to be in the music industry and be a musician. I wanted to give that legitimacy without, being, the broke musician that I am today, and so it was, and so that's what I started doing, and and I'm glad I took that path now. But at the same time, I wish that I had given myself permission to be an artist earlier. I wasn't really focusing on songwriting. I was focusing on learning everything I could about microphones and, speakers, and buying a bunch of plugins and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until I sort of started sharing a studio space with a friend I went to college with, Davis, goes by a slouch on socials.
Okay.
He kind of encouraged me to really, like I would start a song and he'd be in the room, while we were, working on stuff, and I would be like, this is horrible, and just like delete it, and be like, stop doing that. Like, just like, and then he kind of behaved like my training wheels on how to like be confident in myself and as an artist, and really gave me a lot of confidence in what I was actually doing, and that I could, make things that were good. And so he got he just randomly signs up for things as well. He's just a very outgoing dude, and he'll just go and sign up for things without any intention on ever completing them or going and doing it. So he signed up for this like pay to play, really kind of scammy show and he doesn't have a band. He doesn't have, he didn't have any music prepared or anything. He just signed up for this random thing. It's some company. I assume the pandemic has swallowed them up, but it was just like a pay to play thing for a whole bunch of artists to take place at Celebrities Nightclub on Davie Street.
Oh.
And he was just like, yeah, we're going to need to put a set together. So we're just going to use all of your songs, and so that's kind of where we, and we were on this studio on a farm, There was another dude who lived on the property. His name was Dave. He played drums. And so the three of us just like, I was just kind of given this deadline of now you've got to finish all these songs and make them playable for this one set. And it was kind of a silly change of headspace, but that's kind of what that was that was that proto Aridonis phase of just like, here's me trying to make these songs work in a live setting and make it an interesting performance, and make it kind of what I want it to be, what these sort of lofty goals I have in my head are, and realize them a little bit. And then after that was kind of when I was like, oh, I can actually like do this. Like it was like a beta test for the whole Aridonis idea, and I didn't know what to call it yet, because my name is Aridonis, and so the last thing you ever think to call yourself when you want to go be an artist is your name. But I realized I was pretty search engine optimized kind of from birth, so.
Yeah, I did that too. I used my own name. So I have a funny story about that too that I'll just briefly relay. Folk Alliance. I used to play in a folk band, the conference for folk bands and industry people in that genre. My band registered to go. I was actually in January 2020, and we didn't end up going because our tour booking kind of overlapped on those dates. We didn't get an official showcase, so we didn't go to Folk Alliance, but we registered, and so we started getting on the mailing lists for Folk Alliance and the associated people. And I guess at some point your contact information kind of becomes available, right? So at some point in February 2020, before the last time I flew anywhere, I got a call from this guy. I pick up and I say, hello? And he says, hey, William Chernoff. And I'm like, yeah, that's my name. And he's like, I'm also William Chernoff, but I go by Billy. And so I find this guy, he's actually like 2 generations older than us. And, and he's Billy Chernoff. He's out there and he's recorded like all this country music. And he's like from the same like ethnic background as me too and everything. And we're probably related. We didn't have enough time to establish when, but other than him, I've got my name on lock on the internet, just like yourself, Aridonis.
No. Every time a social media pops up, I've started grabbing it, just because I don't want to.
The digital land grab. Got to go get it,
Exactly. I need to tokenize my name at some point. I don't know how to do that, but we'll see where technology goes.
Gonna have an Aridonis token. Gonna do an airdrop.
I don't want that to be what has to happen, but if it has to happen, so be it,
Oh,
I'll go where I've got to go.
Keeps getting shown, every year we do this is that like there's just infinite ways to skin the cat, and there's just you can find your own way to do things. There certainly is no template that you have to follow anymore.
No, and that's fantastic. It's frustrating because there you don't really know what the steps are, like I think we've kind of both grown up in a way where you can go like, oh, I have this problem. Let me just Google how to do it, and then you get a WikiHow, and then you at least know where to start, But with like being a musician and being an artist in general, the whole point is that there aren't any rules, and so just getting past that block, for somebody like me who's very. What are the steps? And then I'll do the steps, and then I'll have a great time. That can be a roadblock in and of itself.
Yeah, you're right that there's no template. There certainly are people you can follow. Like there's people on YouTube, there's people on social media who can talk all day about what they think are the right strategies to use. And I'm sure we've both seen some of those people. So I could ask you about that. But I thought it was important to mention something about this kind of show that you described, this pay-to-play show experience. And in one of the episodes of your podcast, you said that there wasn't really anybody right now talking about the local industry, so to speak, in the talk show format. And so those conversations aren't as available as they should be. And if they were more available, then more people could learn about it and tap into it. That's kind of what you were saying, right? When it came
the idea is to I wanted to just exchange all those thoughts, because I think we all kind of have a similar take on what we go through sometimes. Yeah.
So that's where it gets interesting, because I'm kind of sequestered in this jazz scene. Like I've grown up in the jazz scene. I entered the folk scene and I worked in the folk scene, but those are two kind of niches. Those are not mainstream popular music genres, right?
Hmm.
So there's actually a lot that I don't know about the Vancouver music scene. And one of the things I don't know is the proliferation of these kind of shows that are less than ideal. Because in the
Yeah.
jazz scene, we don't actually have that. That's not a significant issue because we just kind of have our 8 to 10 venues,
Right.
and they're really small, and we have a small community, and the small community goes out to those venues, and that's kind of it. In my world, you just don't have 3 or 4 artists getting together, sharing a bill, and co-promoting a show. Like, that's not how things are done.
Yeah.
So to people like me who are kind of in that world, I'm just curious from a bird's eye view, like, what are some of those things that you've been observing that you want to talk about? What are the issues on your side of the fence here?
So the big thing that I think a lot of like pop and rock musicians deal with, and this is true. I think there's a bit of a difference in like the rap and electronic music scenes, but in the sort of, I guess I'll call them like guitar driven music,
Or it could be like indie rock or indie pop, that kind of,
that sort of stuff. There's this kind of power structure hierarchy to whether or not you get to just go out and play, and you know, there's a back and forth on whether or not, stuff needs to be like very aggressively curated, right, to make the experience the best for the audience, and some people say that doesn't happen enough. But then there's also, you need an accessibility for people to go and learn how to play shows, right? Because the nature of a lot of that music, indie music, pop music, rock music, and whatever, is it's not really like there aren't as many like bachelor degree programs as there are, in like the jazz scene, right? Like
and that's
know
where you meet people, yeah, for
exactly,
sure.
yeah. So the communities kind of form around people really aggressively sort of educating themselves, I find, in jazz, right? And then they want to go and share in the experience together. Whereas if I'm starting out in my bedroom learning how to play Green Day songs, and then going and wanting to go and play live and learn how to play live, you kind of got to learn how to do that in front of people. There isn't like an environment to go learn and then go play shows, right? It's there's obviously, you still got to learn how to play shows when you're a jazz musician, obviously. But there's learning how to play the music, there's learning how to play shows, all this stuff, and all of that kind of happens in front of somebody when you're playing pop and rock music. So then what happens as a result of this, I think, is people kind of take advantage because you need to play in order to get good at playing. So there's these promoters that will kind of go around and make it so that, yeah, we're going to put 5 or 6 bands on a bill, and we're going to put a system in place where every band is going to guarantee the promoter that they can sell so many tickets, at whatever price. And if they can't do that, then they're going to pay the difference out of their own pocket, right? And, very big asterisk, that would be cool, in my opinion, if the promoter was also going out and finding people to put in the room, but instead they're putting in the entire promotion part of the promoting the show on the musicians. And because they're putting 5, 6, 8 bands on the bill, that's what's going to fill the room, right? And if you've got a very well curated group of people, right? Like if you're like, yeah, we're going to really nail down 8 metal bands, and they're all going to bring their friends that are really fans of the music, right? And not just friends that are doing a favor and aren't really paying attention and don't really care and don't really want to be there and aren't really a part of the live music experience on a local level. They're just coming to hang out with their friends and have a couple of beers. Then it would be cool. Like you'd have a whole room full of people that want to experience their music and experience all the other bands' music and go and you create a live scene off of that. But you just don't really get that. You end up paying these promoters to play these shows to people that don't care, or, paying to play to not very many people at all. And it's just not a very good, wholesome experience. Because I've played other shows, at a slightly higher level, just kind of as a hired gun for different bands or whatever. And it's a totally different experience. It's so great, but you have to do so much sort of backbreaking promotion and work to get past that, and it's and nobody is really kind of stepping in to mediate between the bands and the venues. And That's a lot.
Interesting.
That's a lot to
Yeah,
unpack. Yeah.
it
But
is. And it is something that I'm just not familiar with because,
yeah.
yeah, it's such a different thing in my little neck of the woods. And
Hmm.
it sounds like in the indie world, there's just so much variety that there's not enough cohesion on there. That might be one of the
There's a
issues here,
lot
right?
of there's a
Yeah.
lot of facets to it, and I'm learning more about it as I talk to more people. But that's
Yeah.
been my experience a lot of the time is it's just like the promoters. I think of the promoter as the person that would pick the bands to go on the bill based off of I'm a fan of these bands and I think they would sound good together and make a good experience for some people. And then I'm going to get some people who like that kind of thing and put them in the room. I think of them as being like a matchmaker, you know?
Absolutely. That's
But
it. Yeah.
but
You nailed it.
instead they kind of end up being like a landlord in my in my experience. They're just kind of like I'm just kind of here to get paid, you know? And I'm going to just grab a bunch of people, bunch of whoever's available this Saturday, you know, and I'm not really going to do any promotion. I'm just going to get these people to bring their friends, you know, and if not, they're going to pay me anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, because you can imagine if you were presented alongside the right four other artists at any given time,
Hmm.
if the match was good for each pair
Yeah.
of artists on the bill, then you have actually made something by bringing that audience to that gig. And you might feel like that kind of gig really has a certain value, right? That it doesn't if the match isn't good for all the bands.
Yeah. So you're like a band that's maybe got your first set of songs together and you're just looking to kind of take your first steps into playing shows. And it can be such a frustrating experience because you play your first show and all your friends and your family who've never seen you play before show up. Maybe you're playing last and all those people left because their friend's band played already, you know, and so yeah, it might be a great experience, it might not, but it comes when you get into like the second or third show and all your family and friends, you kind of used up all your favors with them, and then you just kind of lose steam, and then you stop participating, you know? That sucks because there's probably some really good bands that just aren't getting enough experience to get better because they're not playing as part of a community, you know? They're just kind of in these tiny little micro experiences that aren't very well curated and aren't very well put together, and it's a shame. They're like, if we had 100 of those people in and around town, you know, shouting from the rooftops every time something cool happened, you know, then we would have a really vibing community. But it's just there's something missing, and part of it might be infrastructure, right? Part of it might be just liquor laws, you know, is a thing that comes up quite a bit. Like we can't have shows as late as we want to, and at the right venue that we want to. Because, you know, the city doesn't want a venue here, blah, blah, blah. The city's not investing enough in local events to foster community talent, you know. There's a lot of parts to it, but
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to go one more level on too, which was
please.
this idea of the first gig where you have friends and family and what
Yeah.
happens in there, because ultimately your friends and family are not your audience unless they are. Like
Yeah.
they're going to support you because they like you at the first time, but then whether or not they continue being your audience is the same as anybody else that's that at that point. It's just
Yeah.
whether or not they're interested in what you're doing. And I remember I had this with Rhythm Changes where I started Rhythm Changes in kind of the second half of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And since that gig list dropped and since Rhythm Changes has been doing that, the majority of the people in the audience have been not my friends and colleagues. In fact, I would even say the majority of the people who are signed up by email to the free weekly article at Rhythm Changes today, I've never met them, or I could even say I don't know who they are. So at some point that happens. But
Yeah.
is it that what you're describing here is that the existential problem for the artists in this scene is that if you get from gig 1 to gig 3 and that doesn't happen?
Yeah, and that's kind of it. It's a lot of a live performance is feeding on, like, I don't really get anything by playing the songs I wrote to an empty room. You know, I get a lot from playing the songs I write to myself in my room and working on them and being in my little creative bubble, right? But when I want to go out and share it, I want to share it. I want to it's a communication tactic. I want to communicate what I've felt or what my experiences are, or just have a good time, and I want to do that with other people, right? And so when you're going and just kind of dry firing your music out into an empty room or out to people that you can tell just don't care and are just there because they're your friends, and you feel like you're holding them hostage. And that's, and sometimes it's because maybe your music's not quite there yet. Maybe your songwriting's not quite there yet. Maybe the sound guy just sucks, or maybe the sound system sucks. There's
many variables.
There's many variables to that, obviously. But, in a sort of safe venue experience, and there's people that are there just because they want to be a part of the scene, and they're going to encourage you and get you to keep trying. That's what's kind of missing, I guess, is the lubricant in that whole system, and to keep it from just stopping, right? When you have a community to go and, percolate in and figure out what it is you are, you're going to thrive, whether it be because your band or your music gets more successful, touring and doing all that stuff, or just you know that you can go out and have a good time playing your songs for your friends, and your community are going to reciprocate that back at you, and you just know that you're heard, right? Like that in and of itself is a fantastic experience, even if it doesn't gain any sort of commercial traction, and so there's these little gaps that are denying some people that experience, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah. It's like, maybe, and you understand this for sure, I've seen you post about it too, and I've done this, maybe like the worst example of lack of presenter, lack of curation, just firing things off into the ether is Submit Hub rejections.
Yeah. I've got a Discord group that I'm a part of that's like a music marketing thing, and we were just talking about that last night, and it's it hurts.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and obviously there's not very many people on Submit Hub for jazz, right? So you
you got to make it happen.
It's easier that way.
Yeah.
It's easier because there's a limit on how many people you can reach out to. But as far as playlist people and blog people who could review indie pop and rock music, like, I'm sure it's endless. So there's just going to be so many people that you have to sift through when you're going on Submit Hub, which is a great marketplace. It's cool that they collect all those people there together for you to pitch to, so that you don't have to discover each one of them. It's a great concept.
Yeah.
The founder seems like a cool dude, but
exactly.
I mean, it's a funny experience trying to pitch your music all over the place on Submit Hub and getting 100 no's, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like, yeah, I really like this song. I just don't think it really fits in this particular context, or I like, yes, but, or anything like that. Those are the things that really frustrate me, where it's just like, you need to almost know the person's taste before you submit to them, and tailor what you're sending to them accordingly.
Yeah. And
that can be so frustrating, because you're like, oh, okay, so you're saying it's good, but you've still taken my money, and it's still not going to feature in your playlist. Those are the ones where I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
That's where they lose me.
That's really interesting. I'm on the other side of this. I have an outlet I get pitched to, right? And I say that often because I have limited space.
Of course.
At least what I'm doing right now is I'm sending out one free weekly article that has one review in it. So we really have like kind of just under 50 reviews a year.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm in a really small community, so the numbers kind of work out, where there are kind of only that many Canadian jazz albums that get pitched to me every year. I do end up saying sometimes, when there's a different genre pitched to me, I say, yeah, I like it, but I don't have a spot for it. So, you want to find, just like I want to find the other Vancouver music podcasters, you want to find the other people who want to publish the stuff, and you want to make sure the right stuff goes to the right people.
Absolutely. And it's for like, I released 2 songs this year, and one was like a folk song and one was like a sort of harder electronic based rock song, and I'm just like,
hard mode.
Yeah. Those 2 songs are, they don't really fit together. I
listened to the other one too. What's the title of the other one?
Bumper Sticker Sentiments. Yeah.
Very folky. Yeah. Very acoustic guitar driven. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was those are just 2 different places that I was in, and it's like, do I release those as just different artist names? Do I, these are the questions that I keep on dealing with. And so when comes time to, release something and I'm at submit hub time, it's just like so overwhelming because I feel like I've sent 7 or 8 totally different projects to this just the same 100 outlets and got kind of the same results. And I'm like, what is missing here? Because I've tried folk music with you. I've tried, electronic music with you. I've tried like a pop rock, alt track with you, everything.
Can I go in on this? I don't expect you to have the answer to this line of questioning, but maybe we
Please.
can actually get somewhere on this together. Have you yet had the experience of pitching to a writer or an outlet and having them identify with your music, write about it, and it being a grade A fit? Have you had this?
No, I don't think I have. And they were close, but I could tell there was just they didn't really dig in as deep as, and I could tell, it's,
okay. So even this experience that you say is like the good example of it, you still don't really feel like they went in on it to
they didn't get it, like it was,
they didn't get it.
They were just talking kind of about the top level aesthetics, of the song, they weren't really digging in on what was there.
Okay. But that experience, if you found it, if you had it, do we even still agree that still has value? Because maybe somebody could say, oh, it doesn't have value anymore. Like that used to be an important part of the pre-internet industry, but now there's different things going on. I don't necessarily believe this, but I'm just thinking about what could happen here. They could say, oh, that, maybe you can't expect that anymore because maybe that doesn't have any value. On the other hand, it does if you can reach more people through this person who has dug what you presented to them, right? So does this thing that we're talking about, that we're searching for, does it still have value?
I think the context in this case is just like I said, when it comes to playing to a room full of people, I just want to feel like I'm communicating with people and they're communicating back, right? So if somebody can write something about a piece of music that I wrote and really get it, and really get the point that I'm going for or whatever, or, like if they've got something nice to say about it, that's nice too. But when people really align with it and then they can turn around to the community of people that they have and go, hey, check this out. Here's the pitch on why it's cool or why I vibe with it, and then now all these other people are getting it as well, that totally has value. Do people still kind of discover music this way on a massive scale? Because it was a pretty short period of time where blogs and vlogs and stuff like that were the de facto way that people discovered music, and at least, independent music, right? It was kind of in the MySpace to YouTube.
We saw it when we were kids.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was, but it wasn't, but it was already sort of starting to fade out a little bit when you and I kind of, peeked into adulthood. And now it's just kind of it's people that are really just bathed in fandom for music. But nowadays, it's the value of it on a commercial aspect. It's kind of, it's different.
I think we actually identified what the value is, though, because you said the people that they have, right? Like if they get it and they write about it and then they tell their people whom they've gathered about it and that's where the value is. It's the extent to which the writer, and that's where it's just another vertical. It's just another thing, just like a TikToker or a YouTuber or a playlister or an anything. I don't think of them as zero sum personally. Like I don't think, oh, now everybody is doing YouTube and TikTok, etc. So the blog thing is dead. No, it's just another vertical. Like they're additive. If you add a blog that has that value add where they do actually have people, then you have added something to the ecosystem. You haven't necessarily taken anything away from any of the YouTubers and the TikTokers, but if there's nobody there doing that through writing, you've missed a vertical. You've missed an opportunity to add the value. But the value maybe depends on whether or not you, as the outlet, as the writer, if you have the ability to get that audience following you and getting the stuff with you. Because if you're writing and you don't have that, then you haven't added value, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a, you need to have the sort of the group of people that are in the same sort of headspace as you and in the same sphere, and then
Yeah.
and then you're just kind of the curator, right? You're the
Yeah.
person that doesn't control it but can say, hey, check this out. People trust you.
Just like the presenter who's in theory good at bringing together the right four bands where it adds value to you and it unlocks that.
The matchmaker.
And that helps somebody who's starting from their bedroom and does gig 1 get to gig 3 by giving them a way to find some people through a vertical where those people already are, that isn't just the wide open world of the internet that you feel like you have to promote yourself on, right? Too daunting, too impossible to just do that. You have to be able to see some places where you can add yourself, right?
Yeah, and even at the musician level, I'm learning a lot more about marketing, and I've spent a long time because, I've put out a lot of songs that have not really picked up anything commercially. I've been in that, less than 1,000 streams place on Spotify for a long time. So I'm like, okay, clearly I need to do something about something if I want to change that. So, it's either I'm making the wrong stuff for the right people or I'm making the right stuff for the wrong people, and it's just about finding that balance. But a lot of artists on the music marketing TikToks I follow, a lot of them joke about new song out now, new single out now, and that's all a lot of artists have to say because they burned out all their creativity on making the thing, and now they're just like, somebody please do something with this, please listen to this.
That's the value, because if you're the media person and you have found this vertical of people, what you're doing is your priority is finding those people. Whereas when you're an artist, you have other priorities and you have to figure out a way to do everything to get to the finish line. But if those people are there, then we do, I think, agree that does have real value.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying is it's just like, it's so difficult as an artist to kind of, get it to the end zone sometimes. And
okay, so here's where I was going with this line. When I started Rhythm Changes, I knew there were people who were doing what I'm doing now here with this outlet, in the late 90s, going into the 2000s, to some extent during the social media era. But when I started doing it, there was literally nobody doing it in my particular niche in the Vancouver jazz scene. You report that you haven't had this experience where we weren't even thinking somebody local, but specifically it could even be somebody local. You haven't had this experience of pitching to somebody local who gets it.
Yeah.
This is the question that I don't know if we can really answer, but I think we've actually laid something out on. Where are these people? Why aren't they doing it? Why aren't there more Rhythm Changes in the indie genres? Where are these people?
And it's a really good question. I mean, and in the Vancouver space, there's probably that, maybe in Tennessee, and when you go to Nashville, there's probably tons of people, in the local area that are printing magazines and stuff, and people are reading them. It's it feels like they just, I don't know where they are. And I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they just work too much because they got to pay expensive Vancouver rent. Maybe they haven't realized that that's something they can do. And we've kind of a gap has been created in the sort of millennial Gen Z generation just because our priorities are a little different, our attention spans are shorter or whatever it is boomers say about us, right? Like,
and I'm not saying where are these people because I'm implying that they don't exist. That's not what I mean. I'm not implying that the Permanent Rain Press didn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
It has existed since 2012, I think. There are other outlets that exist. But when I say where are these people, I mean time and place. Where are these people who I know do exist out there when they can be showing up for people like you? Why don't they show up? And it's not all to be blamed on them. You're right.
Of course
there
not.
are these other factors that involve. I think that's a key question, because if everything we've discussed over the last 20 or so minutes here is true, there are people that do exist and they do add something that we still agree has real value. That making a vertical of people who want to learn about the kind of music you like, that still is of service. We need to figure out why in some scenes nobody is showing up at particular times and places to do this. Like, I would love to see somebody start a Rhythm Changes like thing, which really only just means like a solo outlet, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't wait to get a opportunity to pitch or write for Exclaim.
Yeah.
Don't wait to get into the next issue of new feeling. Like these things exist, right? But
Yeah.
there's clearly room here. Like maybe the fear for the would-be writer would be, oh, well, people say, oh, it's so saturated. There's so much going on and nobody will find me amid all the other things. But what you said about, oh, I haven't found this person yet. This hasn't happened to me yet. I think that's true for a lot of us.
And it's yeah, there's so many factors obviously to, like, you know, who knows when the show is or what, you know, and where it is, right? There's, you know, I think maybe we all just need to, at the artist level, at the outlet level, at the venue level, at the promoter level, maybe we all just need to be a little bit louder about what we're doing.
Maybe
you know?
it's cyclical, and maybe
Yeah.
we're going back from the wide world of social media, and maybe we want again to have certain places where we know we can find what we're looking for, maybe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, there was, you know, you always hear the stories, you know, in the classic rock days, like, oh yeah, you go to this neighborhood in New York and that's where you'd find Hendrix, you know, just hanging out, or, you know, the Rolling Stones hanging out, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I can't think of a space particularly that's like that. You know, there's venues and stuff like that, but nowhere where we just go and hang out. You know, it's a different experience. You know, we're all a little bit more cloistered, and then we go out for events. You know, and we participate in events, but we don't necessarily just go exist together as much. You
And
know,
just the last 2 years, of course, has really amped that up.
absolutely, yeah. There's you know, I think, yeah, we all just need to be a little bit louder about what we're doing, and a little bit more loud about what our friends are doing, and it's gonna get to the right person eventually. It's just we just don't stop, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think we've reached the point here where we've identified things that are too big for us to not only diagnose but certainly solve.
Of course,
but
yeah.
This has been fascinating. This is the perfect summer episode, in my opinion, where you get to stretch out and just talk about something like this. Obviously, if you're listening to this show and you want to hear more conversations like this, they're being had by Aridonis here on the Justin Aridonis podcast. If you're listening through a podcast app, it's only Spotify, but you can also watch it on YouTube. Tap into his show because he's going to keep having conversations that are like this to some extent.
Yeah.
It was really cool for me to learn about your side of the scene here in the same city where I'm off doing completely different things.
Same
I look
here.
forward to seeing you around in the real world, and thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
This has been fantastic, dude. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Rhythm Changes podcast. If you like what you hear, I invite you to sign up to the free weekly article that I write. This week's article, available now, is an interview with Isabel Leong about the Ghibli Jazz Orchestra. That's right, playing songs and music from those Miyazaki movies. We talked after Isabel played some guitar at the Fort Langley Jazz Festival. And if you like what you read there, you can sign up for future free weekly articles right on our homepage at rhythmchanges.ca.